hitting go live. And we are live. Hey, everybody, you are watching and listening to the We Are Rizin podcast. This is your host, Andrew Benjamin. I'm joined by my co-host, Jay Christian Gary, who is from down from the South in the heartland state of Texas.
What's good, y'all? I hope y'all are enjoying this Sunday matinee, I guess, morning, afternoon, whatever time you're listening to this or watching this. We hope you're enjoying yourself. And it seems like we have a guest in our presence, Andrew. Why don't you introduce more about him?
Yes, it's my colleague from MMASucka.com, Joshua Yule. That's pronounced, right? Y-U-L-E?
Yeah.
I'd asked you if you I had put out on Twitter if anybody wanted to do a Mirko Cro career retrospective. It seems like 10 years ago, but it was in 2020 when Rizin wasn't doing anything. You responded, you're the first, and I was like, hey, let's do it. And then Rizin started doing shows, and then unfortunately it just kept on getting delayed. But I'm so happy you could finally join us, Josh.
That's all right. It's all right, man. You know, good things come to those who wait.
So yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get into this crazy sport of combat sports?
So I'm a copywriter, content writer, from England. I first got interested in the sports because I was reading a lot of martial arts manga, and my friend put me on to MMA. I think the first fight I ever watched, like just because someone had put like clips of it up, was a early Michel Pereira fight. Maybe not like a UFC one, but him doing one of his like crazy spinning kick knockouts or whatever. So I got interested in the sport, started like reading up on it, started watching cards, started getting into it, started doing martial arts myself, which provided another reason to stay into it. So yeah, so that was how I got into it. And actually, one of the early, one of my earliest memories of MMA is watching, I think it was a top MMA upsets video. And the very first fight on that is Randleman versus Cro, which was, of course, a pretty huge upset, especially in regards to where Cro was in the context of his career, and where Randleman was in the context of his career. So, yeah. So Cro pretty early on, though. At that time, I didn't even realize that Cro was actually his ring name and not his last name.
Oh yes, yeah. He has he definitely has like he definitely I guess I would almost say made his name pro wrestler kind of not his full. He went by not his full name like a lot of MMA fighters do. But he kind of shortened it and just made it much more consumable for us who are very. Croatian names can be very hard to pronounce. I don't know. Oh yeah,
is that right? Filipovic.
I mean, come to think of it, don't y'all think it's probably more the fact that he wanted to have a name that could sell well to international audiences rather than just have it go by his last name? I mean, because y'all saying that Croatian competitors, especially athletes, can't really sell off their last names. I mean, look at Novak Djokovic in tennis, or back in the day, the late Rizin Petrovic in basketball.
I think.
Basically saying that a guy by the name of Mirko Filipovic can't sell.
Well, no, I think also, when he didn't he change his name when he came to Japan, because Filipovic is probably a very hard name to pronounce in Japanese or to translate it. So
maybe I'm not sure. I'm not sure of which names that are harder to translate into Japanese.
Plus, let's be honest, Mirko Cro is a very cool name. It just has there's something about that rings like better. I don't know what that just sounds like. I don't know. The name just has some fire to it.
Yeah, it's very.
But let me explain what we're going to be doing. This is the first of career retrospectives of fighters who have retired. I know that retirement is it's a weird word for MMA. combat sports in general, because seems like no one at this point truly ever retires. But I think probably it's fair to say that Mirko Cro has retired and is not likely going to be fighting ever again due to some medical issues he's had. So, and this is a series that we're not going to do like an entire breakdown of every fight, because then that'll take forever and it's also boring and it's not worth it. But to talk about how we got familiar with the said fighter, how like career highlights, favorite fights, their importance to JMMA and just overall MMA. And I think no better way to start off than somebody like Mirko Cro. So yeah, Josh, I'm going to ask you, how did you first become familiar with Mirko Cro?
Like I say, I first saw him on that YouTube video. And I think he was in a couple of other ones related that I would watch. I think there was one going over like top chins, and it wasn't about him, but it was about Mark Hunt taking his kicks. So I think the fact that because a lot of other fighters from this era are like nowhere near as well remembered as Cro, especially guys who weren't like ruling the roost at the time, because he never held like the Pride Championship. But the fact that he has such a easily rewatchable highlight reel, in the same way that Anderson Silva does, he's not a very difficult fighter to understand. There are layers and nuance to his game, but just saying like he's got a really good high kick, he's got a really good body kick, he's got a really good left straight, like that gets you down a lot of what made him dangerous in MMA, and a lot of the reason why he was able to transfer from kickboxing to MMA fairly easily. So just going. So he's an easy fighter to understand, relatively speaking. He's got a really good like highlight reel, which makes it a lot easier for people who started watching later, like I did, to get back into him. And I'd say that's why he's got a lot of relevance today, and that's why he has this presence on the internet, which makes him easier to find out about than say someone like Big Nog, who I also consider to have like a similar standing, but if anything, a more impressive resume, but not quite maybe as memorable highlights. Although Big Nog does have his share of highlights, like the Bob Sapp fight.
Chris, I'll throw it to you. How did you discover Mirko Cro?
Well, and this might come to a shock, as a lot of people might not truly understand, but I basically first caught wind of Mirko Cro in his second stint in the UFC. And that was also around the time when I think Spike TV in the States, now known as the Paramount Network, shown a lot of these old Pride FC compilation shows. And I think there was one in particular where they had, and I know we all have a different opinion about this moron, Joe Rogan, basically put over Mirko Crocop's success, and obviously put over the fact that he was a monster in Pride, not to mention his kicks. As everybody knows, right leg hospital, left leg cemetery or morgue. But still, though, it was like when he came into the UFC the first time around, after winning the Pride Grand Prix in 2006, he was coming in with a lot of hype, only to lose to Gabriel Gonzaga and Czech Congo after knocking out Eddie Sanchez. And, it wasn't until that second run that people really started to get a glimpse of who Cro really was, even if Cro didn't really do well in the octagon compared to all the Pride days. And obviously, the whole Rizin run that he had, which I think I probably enjoyed the most, and I know you did as well, Andrew, because he was basically just beating up the literal Street Fighter map just to win the openweight Grand Prix. But still, though, I'm pretty sure you would probably have a better moment as to what was your favorite Cro. What was your opening to Mirko Cro, so to speak?
Well, actually, yeah, it's same as you, Chris. It was his second UFC run. And I got into MMA much later. So all the Pride stuff, I found that I was watching after the fact. So after Pride's gone and all that stuff. And
I mean,
so
kind of think of it. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, even though it's kind of my thing. I mean, I also obviously watched MMA after Pride as well, and I was kind of looking for a fix to watch other than pro wrestling and basketball. So I got into watching MMA, and I've been hooked ever since. But please continue.
oh yeah, his second UFC run, which was a I don't know if we want to call it successful, semi-successful, but I would call it not that successful. I don't know what everybody's thoughts are. Josh, what would you call his second UFC run overall?
I call it second UFC run losing to Brendan Schaub.
Okay.
Basically everything after the Gonzaga like KO is like post prime, and it's probably a testament to Cro Cop's ability that he was able to like maintain some longevity and still get some like long streaks of wins after that. But yeah, I wouldn't call it like particularly successful. He did get some wins in there, and he was able to avenge his Gonzaga loss eventually. But yeah, I wouldn't call it a success.
Yeah. Okay.
Really.
And actually, just to let everybody know, I was looking it up while everybody was talking. Cro Cop stands for Croatian Cop.
Yeah.
As he was a part of the anti-terrorist unit in Croatia. Something that they would always mention on commentary, that he's like that he was former SWAT team, the equivalent of SWAT in Croatia. Chris, you also bring up a great thing about the right leg hospital, left leg cemetery. Very pro wrestler like. In like having his kind of like the old Taz beat me if you can survive I'll let you
survive if I let you.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, it was kind of like it was something he knew how to promote himself as a fighter as well. You kind of think like, oh, this Croatian guy, he's got to be like all stoic and whatever. No, he knew how to also do the promotional and the entertainment aspects of fighting.
Funnily enough, because you mentioned his time in the anti-terror forces, he actually got into what do you call it? He actually got into kickboxing through, or he got into martial arts anyway. He did some like amateur boxing and stuff first, but he got into it through watching the film Bloodsport, which is of course about a guy in the army who gets sent to participate in this martial arts tournament run by criminals. Of course, we don't know what sort of impact that had on his life, apart from the fact that he used to be in the Croatian army, and they let him go specifically to compete in combat sports, and then he would end up in a organization run by criminals. But
you can basically say that Mirko Cro is a lot like the European version of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Well, isn't Jean-Claude Van Damme from like the?
Yeah, Jean-Claude Van Damme is from Canada, dude.
Is he? Oh gosh.
Oh, he's Belgian. He's Belgian.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, listen. Wow. Yeah, he's I'm 98% sure he's Belgian.
All right, let's solve this. Let's solve this.
Basically, what you're saying is.
Yeah, you're right. He's Belgian.
Basically, what you're saying is Mirko Cro is the combat sports equivalent to Jean-Claude Van Damme, only without the crappy stunts.
Yeah, hey, the stunts don't knock the stunts, man. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, and he definitely has. I think the most amazing thing about his career is that at heavyweight divisions of combat sports are usually considered maybe the most glamorous, but also by analysts like to have like usually thin levels of talent. But he competed in MMA and kickboxing in heavyweight during both periods, like both golden age periods of those heavyweight divisions. He competed in K1 during the K1 golden age, and he competed in Pride during Pride's heavyweight golden age. So that's quite impressive, especially because he wasn't not a particularly big heavyweight, especially during the later half of his career when he's fighting guys like Barnett who have like something like 30 pounds on him. He's not a big heavyweight, but he really wanted to compete at heavyweight, and yeah. Though Pride heavyweight was like a mix, and even K1 heavyweight was like a mix of like really big, genuine heavyweights who wouldn't be able to compete any
Well,
lower,
also,
and light
but
heavyweights fighting
I
up.
think if basically Pride heavyweight was when they ask you, hey, do you want to fight heavyweight? And then you would say yes or no, because they would have like some guys who were like 5'7" and who looked like no more than like 180. I mean, like Sakuraba was competing. I mean, technically at open weight, but he was competing against mostly heavyweights. And then
Yeah.
same thing with a bunch of the other guys who were like,
I
who go
mean,
to,
obviously, when you think about it, Manoa Man comes to mind as well.
yeah. Oh, that too. Minoa Man as well. Um, But before we go into his MMA career, we got to obviously talk about that he started out as a kickboxer. Actually started first kickboxing fight 1996. Joshua, were you even born in 1996?
No, I was born in 1997.
Oh my
Are you
God.
going off his Wikipedia resume for kickboxing?
Yes, I'm going off that right now.
That might not be his first fight because kickboxing, he probably started sometime before that, just because the kickboxing resumes on Wikipedia are almost never complete.
Oh, in general,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah, but that's his first recorded one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, does anybody? I mean, he fought just a murderer's row of people in his career: Joel Banner, Ernesto Hoos, Mark Hunt,
Peter Hart.
Yeah, so I mean, Josh, do you have any career highlights or favorite fights from his kickboxing fights?
Well, I didn't have because I was mainly focused on his MMA career. I didn't have enough time to just watch all the way through his what do you call it? All the way through his kickboxing career. I was like, I'm not a kickboxing expert. I don't know like what to do. So I focused on his run to the semi to the become the runner up in the K1. I think it was the 1999 Grand Prix. Let me check. It might be in a different year, but the one where he beats Bernardo, Musashi, Greco. Bernardo actually kind of he's passed away now. He actually kind of used to be a pretty. I think he's one of the better ones that people don't know about because I think he went 2-2 with Andy Hoog, and was a runner up in the one that Andy Hoog won. It's the 1999 one. Sam Greco I've heard about, very very big, powerfully built guy. I think Musashi was a bit of a smaller guy for that division, but he beat them all. He beat them all by finish. So that is a pretty tremendous run, especially when you consider that two of them have it's basically all in the same week, and two of them on the same night. Then I watched his loss to Ernesto Hoos, which is his second fight with Ernesto Hoos. He'd have three and lose all of them. And so, yeah, so pretty impressive, Bernardo. One thing I did notice is that compared to his MMA career, Cro Cop, because in his MMA career, Cro Cop is very, very reticent with his pace. Like he keeps a very tight control on his pace. He's always wanting to control the amount of exchanges. And of course, his main weapons are a left straight, which he can throw going backward or going forward. It's very, very fast. It hits very, very hard. He's very accurate with it. Of course, the left high kick and the left body kick, which both come up very fast. He throws them without chamber, so they come chopping up very fast, very hard. And he throws everything with power. But in the kickboxing, and his other combination that he likes is that he'll lead with the left straight, and then he'll come around with the right hook. And that's a 1-4, and he'll use those as his primary means of offense. But in the kickboxing, you'll see a lot less of just the individual left straights and a lot more 1-4s. And sometimes he'll throw 4-punch combinations, so 1-4, 1-4. And he's really trying to hurt Ernesto Hoos early with those combinations. And Ernesto Hoos is sort of putting on the guard and weathering the storm in the first round. But I think it becomes clear why, because as you go into the later rounds, you're seeing that he's starting to tire, and I'm not sure if it's because he's had to fight so often in that tournament and his conditioning isn't as good because, well, I say conditioning isn't as good. The thing about Cro Cop styles, because he's throwing everything super hard, he's draining his energy a lot. He'll drain his energy quickly if he's forced to work a lot. And so with the Samuel Greco fight, he was being forced to clinch a lot on top of everything else. So after the first round, he starts to tire. against Hoost. And Hoost starts doing these because obviously Hoost was amazing with leg kicks. But not only will Hoost kick you once he's finished his own combination, but when you finish his combination, he's really good at anticipating just when you've thrown your last punch, and just as you're putting your foot down, just as you're putting your hands back, he will kick you just as you finish your combination. Because you're not immediately going to throw another punch after you've finished a combination. And that's when he can kick you in the leg, and he will. So Cro Cop is taking loads and loads of these leg kicks. And then in the third round, Hoost suddenly level changes, hits him with a massive right to the body that folds in the solar plexus, that folds Cro Cop up. And then Cro Cop gets up from that, and Hoost gets him in the corner again, hits him with a left hook to the ribs, and that Cro Cop spits out his mouth guard, tries to get up from that, can't. So a pretty impressive run. But that sort of like, I think, puts Cro Cop where he is. He's in the sort of the tier below the best. He's able to beat very good guys, but he's not able to beat Hoost for the Big Banana, the K1 Grand Prix, at a time when that would really have made him like top of the heap. He's not able to. I think he gets a majority decision over Peter Arts, but I didn't watch that one. And he gets a decision over Mark Hunt, which they would later run back in MMA. But Mark Hunt can't. It's very competitive, but Cro Cop's clearly got the cleaner boxing, and he gets a knockdown from a high kick, which I think he hurt his foot on. But yeah, so that's his kickboxing. Basically, his kickboxing career, very very good, but just not at that very top tier. Just like just a step below that, which might have been one of the reasons why he swapped over to MMA. Though he also cited the money, which is,
yes,
if you're a kickboxing fan, it's kind of unfortunate, especially nowadays, that sometimes when they're really in their prime, kickboxers will get poached to MMA just because they can't offer the same amount of money that you can in MMA. So even if guys would like to do kickboxing, sometimes they just can't afford.
I also sorry to interrupt you, Josh, but I also think at the time that he was running down his K1 career, that, and Chris, maybe I think you might know this more. I think that was when K1 was like under like very like there was like a lot of shady business shit going around with like fighters not being paid, and also I believe because there was the K1 when it first started was actually like they paid their fighters a lot, and then perhaps Yakuza stuff got involved. You know, that's the story of every Japanese promotion apparently at this point.
I mean, come to think of it, you're kind of right, because Mirko Crop's MMA and kickboxing careers basically intertwined with one another from January of 2001 all the way up to like the end of 2003. And aside from, all the shady business practices that was going on, I'm pretty sure that there was probably a whole lot of backstage politics that went on when it came down to K1, and how it was ran, especially considering how Bob Sapp got so over.
So actually, I'll go to you, Chris, in a second. But my career highlights for his kickboxing career are very small and minimal. Like you said, Bob Sapp. I just love that fight because it is an atypical Bob Sapp fight in terms of taking potential. I think that was the impetus for why he started taking dives, if I remember correctly, because Cro Cop broke his orbital bone in that match. Because he punches Sapp in the face, and Sapp just like falls down. It's actually very similar. It's very similar to Roy McDonald Robbie Lawler fights. If you remember that, when Roy got his orbital bone by Lawler, he kind of almost not coward. I don't want to use that word, but he kind of just fell and kind of like his body gave up the same way. And I think ever since then, that's when Bob Sapp was like, okay, I'm gonna start doing the jobber gimmick for MMA. And also my other career highlight, I think, and it was from his kickboxing fight with Mark Hunt. And as you know, his career highlights, like you said, were kicking people, knocking him out with his kicks. But yet Mark Hunt was the one guy he kicked who just got right up. And yeah, he knocked him down straight, but Mark Hunt just got up like he was getting out of bed. And like, if that Mark Hunt won a very close fight against Cro Cop in that one, but that was like maybe the one time where like Cro Cop, it was like there was nothing that you could do to put down Mark Hunt at that
So
point.
I think the kickboxing is the one where Mirko wins. The one where Mark Hunt gets hit by it and doesn't go down is the MMA one, and that's the one where Mark wins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I stand corrected then.
yeah.
But nonetheless, their fights, regardless, both in MMA and kickboxing, are highly memorable. Just because of Mark's sturdy adamantium head being able to absorb anything that Cro Cop is giving. I think that was the K1. Wasn't that when Mark Hunt was? That was when he was a weight replacement. I think, right? I think I think that was the one he came in as a late nose replacement, if I remember correctly.
I can't remember. I haven't actually. I will say I haven't read Mark Hunt's biography, but I saw an excerpt of it once where he goes. He basically says that some of the other K1 kickboxers didn't hold him in super high regard because he came across as someone who wasn't sort of always training seriously. Because throughout a lot of his MMA and kickboxing career, Mark Hunt would have trouble with like discipline. He'd have trouble with
playing too
drug
much
addiction.
Counter-Strike as well.
Yeah. And every what do you call it? There's a famous incident where someone was like giving Mark Hunt like grief on Counter-Strike, and he'd say the guy actually told him his address, and it was actually really close, so he actually got out and walked to the guy's house, rang the doorbell, and it was like a 12-year-old kid or something, so he just turned around and left. But what do you call it?
That's funny.
That's but yeah, so he has that kickboxing career. He swaps over. I think what's most impressive about Cro Cop is that there's almost no like run up to like a serious career. Like he has 3 fights with Fujita, who is extremely durable, okay wrestler, but not like a
but hold on, but for Josh, before we
Yeah.
go into his MMA career, Chris, I just want to know if you have any highlights, career highlights or favorites from his kickboxing career that you want to give.
Well, to be honest, I don't, because a lot of the memories that I had of his kickboxing career came toward the end of his kickboxing career, where he won the K1 Grand Prix in 2013, and obviously the stint that he had in Glory, where he lost to Remy Bonjasky. No, wait, actually, it wasn't Remy Bonjasky. Yeah, it was Remy Bonjasky. And the 2-fight run that he had against former kickboxer turned cheat in boxing, Jarrell Big Baby Miller. But I obviously did not know of his kickboxing career up until obviously after his kickboxing career was over, when he was getting back into mixed martial arts full time for the last time. But still, I mean, I don't really have a lot of good memories about his kickboxing career, other than the fact that a lot of the memories that he had, I probably wasn't around to see them at the time. But still, though, what I can say is, for those of the memories that I did miss out on, I can say that he was probably one of the better kickboxing to MMA transfers to ever grace a ring.
Actually, sorry, Chris. We're gonna talk about his MMA career in 1 second. The one thing I wish we could have gotten in his career, and I know they fought in MMA. I wish we could have gotten a kickboxing match between him and Alistair Overeem sometime. I think that would have been awesome. And
that most definitely would have been awesome, because the fight that they had at Dream 6 back in 2008, that was pretty much disappointing.
And it ended in no contest due to groin strikes. And I'm surprised that UFC never ran that back at some point. I'm really surprised that that fight never came up for whatever reason, or Dream even tried to do it over again. As well. I guess he's maybe the best heavyweight kickboxer currently like now. It would have been great to have seen Cro Cop in his prime versus Badr Hari.
No. Are you sure about that?
I don't think their primes would have synced up at all, to be honest.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know. They're just so different in style.
I think the thing is like because Butter. I mean, Butter Hari is like the guy who can struggle with guys massively below him and then knock out like guys in a minute who are elite. Um, I think I'd probably put because Butter Hari could have sometimes shaky defense. I'm not saying he
Uh,
couldn't get knocked out, but if we're to talk about Prime versus Prime, Butter Hari also had a really good right hand. And one thing about the open stance Southpaw versus Orthodox matchup is that it does make that sort of lead right hand very available. So
Mm.
I'm not sure if the open stance matchup, which usually was such a part of Cro Cop's success because it allowed him to go in with left straight leads, it allowed him to throw the body kick, and there's no easy way to guard it. It allowed him to throw the head kick, and there's no easy way to guard it. I wonder if that might have ended up being to Butter Hari's advantage rather than Cro Cop.
Okay, I'll walk it back. What
I mean,
Crow Cop versus Rico Verhoeven.
eh, I mean, come to think of it, if I can say my piece on the whole Badahari thing, I think Badahari would have done everything he could in the ring, out the ring, in the courtroom, in training just to avoid Mirko Cro. I think that when it comes down to a Verhoeven versus Cro bout, I think, as the kids would have said, that would have been lit. Because you got obviously Rico Verhoeven is trying MMA, but his main goal is kickboxing, even though Glory is like the Titanic right now. I mean, seriously. I think that if Rico Verhoeven were to stay in K1 instead of try to fulfill some American hedge fund deal by forming Glory and watching it crash and burn, I think that fight would have probably been one of the better fights of the 20 teens if that were to have happened.
Mhm. But I think it also just to put his his kickboxing career in perspective, I think with the names and the fights that we talked about, I think definitely that is to say that that was the golden age of heavyweight kickboxing uh anywhere in the world. And will there ever be something like that again? I don't think so. No.
They'd have to start paying a lot more to start
Yes.
attracting decent talent. Just like if we want to see a golden age in heavyweight MMA, they're going to have to start dealing with their talent properly.
Yeah.
Because neither is happening in either sport right now, to be
I,
honest.
it was it was right time, right place, the right atmosphere for that type of kickboxing to flourish in Europe and in Japan. And yeah, that's the thing is that kickboxing right now the pinnacle of kickboxing is Tenshin and Takaru. That's like the pinnacle right now. And I don't know what happens beyond that, but heavyweight kickboxing is almost it's a dinosaur relic at this point, which is kind of surprising. Yeah, you because usually heavyweights have always been they've kind of always been dummy proof or foolproof when it comes to a lot of this stuff. But yeah, heavyweight kickboxing just never recovers. And even K1 right now.
I mean, of course it never recovered because FEG Global died. That's
And,
probably why it never recovered.
and heavyweight kickboxing K1 is I don't want it's not dead at in the current K1, but it's not a focus at all. And Rise, I don't even think has a heavyweight division.
They have heavyweight fights, but not a division.
Yeah, so that just goes to show how much has changed since the era of Cro Cop, Schilt, Hunt, all these people who were top dogs in their sports. But we're gonna get into what I think what we all know we got from Cro Cop, and that's his MMA career. And I'll start, Josh. I'll first start off with you. Would you call his career, his overall career in MMA, a successful one? His entire run.
I think, I mean, it depends what standards you're going for. I think it's impossible
By
to say
yours,
it's not.
I want to go by your standards.
I think it's impossible to say it's not a very impressive career. I think that he had some bad luck in terms of firstly, there were some he had some individual bad luck in fights that may have hampered his career. Also, I don't think his career was as great as he was as good as, if that makes any sense. So basically, because I'll take you through an example. Stuff like the Big Nog fight, which is a pretty important fight for him. He's just picked up his two first really important heavyweight wins over like all his fights were at heavyweights, but before that he had fought Wanderlei Silva and Sakuraba. These
don't
were
ignore his fight against Yuji Nagata and Alberto Del Rio. Those were his most important wins up until his loss.
Yeah, but what do you call it? I mean, to be honest, because if we start right at the beginning, the Wanderlei Silva fight is actually quite interesting because Silva is fighting completely like opposite to how he normally fights. Like he's instead of just rushing in, he's being very tentative. He's timing his bursts very carefully. He's throwing like these lead leg kicks to get Cro Cop checking, and then he'll come in with punches afterwards. So he's not fighting like the madman he usually is, except when he suddenly needs that little burst of energy, and then he'll suddenly turn on the berserker again and go in with a flurry. But that fight is technically a draw because it was fought under special rules where there was no judging. The rounds were like 3 minutes, so 3 5-minute rounds like in kickboxing, and anytime they hit the ropes, they'd be stood up. But Wanderlei, if that fight goes to judges, Wanderlei wins. And Cro Cop hasn't developed anywhere near the anti-wrestling that he would later have in his career. But that actually shows up in his next fight because he fights just after this Sakuraba, and a Sakuraba who's still quite, maybe not at the peak of his powers, but still quite good. Because Wanderlei was like right in the middle of his amazing title run well, I say title run because not all of those were technically title defenses, but his amazing run at Pride light heavyweight where he was undefeated for ages. Well, had a run of no losses for ages, and what do you call it? Cro Cop should have lost that fight, but it goes to draw. So he goes up against Sakuraba, who's just had 2 fights with Wanderlei, where he had moments in both but lost both. And against Sakuraba, Cro Cop's takedown defense actually looks great. It's actually striking which gets him in trouble because I don't think he's as used to the southpaw matchup, and Sakuraba lines up a punch off the because Cro Cop's kick, because it's a southpaw matchup. Cro Cop is kicking, instead of kicking to the head of the body, he's kicking to the legs, and these are mean leg kicks. But he's not setting them up because you don't want to be like throwing tons of combinations and get taken down. And every time Sakuraba's shooting on him, Cro Cop's hitting a really, really fast sprawl. But then when Cro Cop throws one of these unset up leg kicks, Sakuraba throws a left straight down the pipe and actually knocks him down. Which is absurd when you consider that Cro Cop's like a K1 elite K1 kickboxer, and Sakuraba is like half his size. Started in a wrestling base. But Sakuraba was a terrible guard passer, can't get past Cro Cop's novice guard, gets stuck in it, and Cro Cop actually has like a very simple guard plan for this. If Sakuraba postures up to really land strikes, he's going to open his guard and push him away, and he actually does that at one point. But I think it's in the second round, near the end, Sakuraba gets punched heavily 3 times from the guard that he's struggling to pass, and like heavy punches, and I think that's where he gets his orbital broken, because he's got his orbital broken at the end of the round. So yeah, so then Cro Cop picks up 2 great wins over Heath Herring and Igor Vovchanchin, and against Herring, his takedown defense is on point. Against Vovchanchin, he gets him leaning into a kick. So he's looking like a guy with really good takedown defense, who's also like this terrifying striker. And when he fights Big Nog, it looks like this is for the fight that could propel him into a fight with Cro Cop, because it's for the interim title. And he's looking absolutely like on point. He's stuffing everything that Big Nog does. Big Nog actually shoots, tries to pull him to half guard. He survives there. He gets out. He's stuffing everything. He's in there striking on the feet. He's just taking Big Nog apart. I'm just gonna sort to my notes for a second. But Big Nog is really, really struggling. At one point, like Cro Cop, because the thing is like Cro Cop has a really like tentative style. So when Cro Cop opens up, like, he means business. So at one point he throws a left body kick, a left high kick, a left straight, 1-4, 1-4, I think, and then another body kick. So he just like absolutely puts a beating on Big Nog. And at the end of the first round, he hits him with a high kick and then a left straight as Big Nog's been hit by the high kick. This is how tough Big Nog's chin is. He literally gets head kicked by Cro Cop, eats a left straight from Cro Cop after he's been after that, and doesn't get put out totally. And Cro Cop is moving in for a ground and pound kill, and that's when the Big Nog gets saved by the bell. So it's like game of seconds, like 5 more seconds in that round. Big Nog might have been put out by ground and pound, but in the second round, Big Nog throws a combination. And then he's obviously feints, like he's about to throw another combination, and then he shoots in. And this time he's too far in. The sprawl doesn't work. He gets him down, immediately cuts through that guard like butter. And that's where it goes all wrong. He starts ground and pounding him. Cro Cop tries to buck him off, and he snags an armbar, and that's it. And that means all of that arc up to trying to have a crack at Fedor's title has just gone up in smoke because what do you call it? Because of just 5 seconds left in the round, and then making one mistake against the guy he was beating up. So I mean, obviously that's a great win for Big Nog, but that's what I mean is like Cro Cop was by that point Cro Cop was like, maybe you could argue he was the second best in the world, even though he lost that fight because he's doing so well. But his career wasn't entirely reflecting how good he was, and the fact that he had a pretty good career just shows how good he was.
I definitely also feel we gotta separate his career, because he clearly had 3 arcs, I think, or at least 3 or 4 arcs in his career. Obviously, his Pride career, his first UFC career, his second UFC stint, and then his Rizin career. I don't count his Bellator career because he only had 1, and I know that was his last fight. But like, I think it's fair to say he at least had 4 distinctive arcs.
I think honestly, I think you can stick his first UFC run and his second one in the same like sweep. So I agree with you, as 3 sweeps. I think Pride, UFC, and then the streak at the end of his career, because there's actually a UFC fight in there, but the streak at the end of his career where he has just that big 10 fight win streak. And this is how what do you call it? This is how weird Cro Cop's career is. Do you know what the longest win streak in his career is?
That would probably be from 2004 to 2005.
No, it's the one right at the end of his. It's the one right at the end of his career. The one that ends with him beating Roy Nelson in Bellator. That's such his biggest. That's the biggest streak of his career.
Of course.
Because and that's yeah.
I mean, right, of course, because it started with him making a rag doll out of Satoshi the Rhino Ishii's boring behind, and then it ended with him beating Roy Nelson to a less than favorable crowd in the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. Yeah, which I'm pretty sure, Andrew, you were there for.
No, I wasn't there for that. I was there for the finals of the Rizin Grand Prix that he won, though. I was there for that.
Of course.
Well, yeah, let's talk about his Pride career, because I definitely think, I think regardless of his, that streak that you just mentioned, I definitely think that his Pride career will always be the pinnacle of his, his career.
Agreed. But I just think that's the interesting part, is that despite how good he was in Pride, that I'd say that shows how high the opposition he was facing in Pride was.
Yeah.
That because he started out, he couldn't get like a really long streak. Well, I say really long streak. He does go on a couple of medium lengths, impressive streaks.
So Chris, I wanna throw it to you. Pride, tournaments. He was a part of the open weight tournament. Barring that, so many memorable fights. That includes also his losses. That like probably the most notable. Fedor. One of the most anticipated fights in that generation of MMA. That was really, it was the 2 best heavyweights at that time, because UFC heavyweight was dog shit. I think I don't even remember who this is, like the era.
Tim Sylvia,
Andre
Arlovsky.
I mean, okay, Arlovsky, is great, but Sylvia was what it was, whatever.
He was boring.
Yeah.
But he did beat Arlovsky, but he
Yes.
was generally considered boring while he was champion.
But I think also Cabbage Correa was also in this era of UFC heavyweights. I think.
It just
which is
what you're trying to say is the UFC was so boring that Josh Barnett had no choice but to leave.
Well, it was absolutely the quality of fighters was so garbage. It was compared to what the heavyweight division is now. It was just basically, it was almost barroom brawling. And when somebody like Frank Mir, who came in and was like submitting guys, he stood out because heavyweights were not submitting people on the regular like he was. Not to say that ballroom brawling isn't bad. Listen, I love my Don Fries and all that stuff. I'm just saying the technical quality, Pride was way ahead of UFC at this time.
Of course, by leaps and bounds. And obviously, you look back at the fact that Cro Cop had a 24-2 record in Pride. I mean, obviously, you also need to look at the losses that he had. No, wait, actually, no. He had a 20 win, 4 loss, and 2 draw record in Pride. But if you look at the losses,
he definitely loses more than 2 times in Pride, because he
loses. Of course. He got submitted by Big Nog. He got knocked out by Randleman. May he rest in peace. He lost via decision to both Fedor at his prime and Mark Hunt in his prime. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of weird, don't you think?
Well, Mark Hunt fight is very close, though. It's a very close fight, and it's one of those fights where, like, I'm so surprised that they didn't give it a draw, because Japan loves giving draws, and I would think they're like, oh, you could give that one a draw and you could get away with it. But I'm actually really surprised that either if you picked either one, it's not like I don't think you can't say either one is a robbery in that case, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, that was a close fight. I will say, though, another fight which I watched, which people don't talk about, but I thought was surprising, is that I felt Cro Cop was maybe not lucky, but the second Josh Barnett fight could have gone either way.
Actually, we'll talk about that, Josh. I know you watched a whole bunch of fights from Cro Cop's career, and that's actually one of the series of fights that I don't hear is ever brought up in terms of like people who just beat somebody else. And that's an interesting one, because at that time, Josh Barnett was maybe the best submission guy that was not Brazilian in Pride at that time. And for him to Brazilian or Japanese, I'll say, I'll include Sakuraba with that, but yeah. Josh Barnett, and especially a heavyweight, I'll say that as well. Josh Barnett had that catch wrestling, kind of just a very high pressure, basically manipulate the joints so they break or you give up style of just. It was definitely, it wasn't the traditional Brazilian jiu-jitsu side that like a Nogueira did. And it was really, it was really like, it was kind of like, once you got caught in a Josh Barnett, there was, if you could, Cro Cop showed, other than getting, and Fedor showed that, that Nogueira's jiu-jitsu could be nullified. If you played it right, but Josh Barnett's submission game was just so good. I would maybe even put it up a little bit above Nogueira's at that time. But yeah, Cro Cop beat him 3 times when they met. Every time they met.
I actually think that that trilogy is really interesting. First fight is a little bit of a dud, because Barnett breaks his shoulder really quickly. He does get Cro Cop down very early, which is actually a pretty bad sign for Cro Cop, because I've as I was watching the fights, I noticed what I thought were 3 maybe weaknesses in Cro Cop's style. First one is that if you make him work a lot, you can tire him out, because he throws everything with like so much force, because he doesn't throw barely any jabs or anything. It's just almost always super power left straight, like full power high kick, full power body kick. So the fact he keeps exchanges very low when it's on his terms. So if you are willing to really go forward and make him work, it is possible to tire him out. Although that being said, what do you call it? It's also very going forward might mean you get walked onto a massive counterpunch, or get kicked in the head. But the other part is that when he gets taken, he's very, very hard to take down. He is super strong in the clinch, and his sprawl is absurd. It's very fast. Often he'll throw it off at an angle. Sometimes he'll get a headlock and knee you in the head.
Actually, Josh, you actually bring up a good point when you brought up Bloodsport and Jean-Claude Van Damme. I think aren't there photos of Cro Cop doing the Jean-Claude split?
Yeah,
He was for a heavyweight, he was a very flexible guy, like absurdly flexible. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, but you're exactly right. Yep, he can do the full splits, which is probably part of why his kicks were so fast and fluid. Maybe not as skilled setting up as someone like Peter Aerts from kickboxing, but probably prettier than Aerts, whose kicks were sort of like workman-like, but very, very effective. Well, maybe workman-like's unfair, but like Aerts' kicks weren't as pretty as Cro Cop's kicks. But Aerts was, I think, better at setting them up. But if you what do you call it? If you go through and look at say like the actual parts where people can get Cro Cop down, he's a lot easier to keep down than he is to take down. So the fact that Barnett gets a takedown very early in the first fight is not a great sign. But Barnett hurts his shoulder and can't continue. So that fight's TKO quite early. They get a rematch, and this time Barnett gives Cro Cop a lot of trouble. He's not trying to take him down. He's clinching him, and Cro Cop will dig the underhooks like you do. And Barnett will get a body lock around the side, and Cro Cop will dig the underhooks. But then Barnett will keep Fedor there because Barnett weighs like 30 pounds more, so he will like lean on Fedor against the ropes, and then he will knee him, and he keeps Fedor in these big sequences, just kneeing and kneeing and kneeing him. Fedor does have his moments of success. Barnett goes for
you mean Cro Cop?
Yeah, Cro Cop does have his moments of success against Barnett, even though he's getting mauled in the clinch, because Barnett goes for a sacrifice throw where you're falling down first and then you're trying to throw the guy so you go on top of him. But am I saying Fedor?
Yeah, you were saying Fedor before. I was like,
yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, my notes getting mumbled up. I would have loved Fedor to fight Barnett.
Oh yeah,
but Cro Cop is getting mauled in the clinch, and then Barnett goes for a sacrifice throw. Lands on the bottom because of Cro Cop's incredible balance, and he what do you call it? And gets like beaten up on the ground for portions of that. And then later on, what do you call it? Cro Cop does get a good combination off, like some 1-4-1-4, hurts Barnett at one point. But a lot of that fight is just Cro Cop eating knees in the clinch, and it is a very, I'd say, I'm surprised it didn't end up being a split decision because that was very close. But in the third fight, I think the third fight might be one of Cro Cop's finest hours, because he not only does he come off of his absurdly satisfying head kick KO of Wanderlei Silva on the same night, he walks in to to this fight with Barnett, who gave him so much trouble, who's just beaten a guy who Cro Cop lost to, and Cro Cop has changed up his strategy completely. Instead of digging double underhooks, he's putting his hips way back. He's framing on Barnett's chest, so Barnett can't get up the knees as easily. Cro Cop is he's getting to the body kick really well. He's messing Barnett up with like heavy punches. And Barnett is like really struggling to keep up. I think Barnett gets in on a single leg but can't impose his grappling. But what do you call it? Let's see. I'm just checking my notes the last time.
Basically,
there's one part where
basically what you're trying to say is his sprawling technique.
His sprawling technique's amazing, but that it's not just that. He's just neutralizing Barnett really easily in the clinch now when he couldn't before. But there's one part where he lands like 5 left hands in a row, where he throws. Barnett covers up like this. Cro Cop throws like a what do you call it? A left uppercut, and then a left hook like between the elbows. So there's a part where he lands like 5 left hands in a row. But the end comes where he I think what makes this Cro Cop's finest hour for me is when is actually the finish, because he lands like a bunch of left hands from the single collar tower, which is not normally something you ever see Cro Cop do. But he lands one. He lands so hard that I'm not even sure if Barnett falls down from a body shot or from the headshot that landed just afterwards. But Barnett collapses. He gets guard again, but then instead of trying to disengage or do anything like that, Cro Cop just muscles on, stays in guard and just mauls him. Like, he's not trying to get the fight stood up. He has become like. I mean, there are other parts where you could say, okay, here's where Cro Cop is not just a kickboxer with really good takedown defense; he's a full MMA fighter. But I think this is a really good point where it's like, this is I think this is his last Pride fight. This is just a culmination of how much Cro Cop has adapted, and not just be a kickboxer with good takedown defense. He's just mauling a really good grappler in his guard, and he breaks Barnett's orbital. So that puts paid to like the weird ending in the first fight, controversial decision in the second fight. The third fight, there is absolutely no question of who's the better fighter. He is just an absolute demolition. So yeah, just a really I'd say, well, maybe not the first fight because it's just a guy breaking his shoulder, but the second and third fights I'd say are really, really impressive duology. And probably, consider it, putting it in perspective, these are probably Cro Cop's best wins, because
sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Because while he is fighting in a really good heavyweight division, the other two really good people, there are four really good people in that heavyweight division: Barnett, Cro Cop, Big Nog, and Fedor. And we've already talked about his loss to Big Nog, but the Fedor fight is that's great.
Chris, I want to know what are some highlights and favorite moments from Cro Cop's Pride career from your perspective, and why was it Cro Cop versus Yuji Nagata?
No, I think you were probably gonna say, why was it Cro Cop versus Alberto Del Rio?
or that too, yeah.
Yeah, but I think, and obviously, I wasn't around mixed martial arts well enough to see when he faced off against Wanderlei Silva or Kazushi Sakuraba or even Heath Herring to really truly get a glimpse of the breadth, I guess, of Mirko Cop's career. But when it came down to the head kick knockout he had over the usually unstoppable ice cold Igor Vovchanchyn, and obviously the Dos Caras Jr. knockout, because let's face it, he deserved that. But those two particular fights really gave people a sense as to who Cro Cop was early on in his MMA career. And this was as he was basically crossing back and forth between kickboxing and MMA on a frequent basis. And I think that stopped after he lost to Big Nog. But still, though, when it came down to those first four fights, I mean, those first 6 fights in Pride, obviously, the draw with Nobuhiko Takada, who now runs Rizin, the draw with Wanderlei Silva, which we never got a full sequel or full return to it because we were supposed to get that in Rizin, but we got hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray, in the words of Stephen A. Smith.
They did get a rematch later in Pride in like 2006, I think.
Oh, right, of course. But we never got like a third installment of the fight.
Yeah, another one of those things that I'm surprised UFC never did.
But still, though, let me finish.
Yep.
Those first 6 fights that he had in Pride, Takada, Silva, Sakuraba, Fujita, Herring, Igor, and Alberto, those fights were pretty much, the antithesis of who Mirko Cro Cop was as a fighter. I mean, yeah, sure, you can discredit the 2 draws all you want, but those 6 fights that he had in Pride in those early days really gave people a sense as to how much of a fighter Mirko Cro Cop was, even though it was basically in the time that he was crossing back and forth between MMA and kickboxing.
And
Now, you,
oh yeah, I was gonna say, I think definitely if one of the things if you want to introduce somebody to MMA, I definitely think if you want to show, I think Cro Cop is one of the easiest fighters to get people who are not into MMA to understand or enjoy MMA, because when it came to Cro Cop, especially his Pride career, it was basically simple. He knocked out people 90% of the time, and that's what most people respond to. They understand that they can, okay, the guy got kicked in the head and falls down and doesn't get up. Simple enough. It's that's the only problem with like jiu-jitsu, people like Damian Maya, Big Nog, Josh Barnett to a degree, where it's if that's the whole, is that unless you are in the MMA sphere, you're not gonna kind of get that aspect of the game. But I feel like Cro Cop, he translates to any, and you can translate to the non-MMA fan, to the, I guess, the casual, the lowercase c word, as some people like to say. And yeah, Cro Cop's and Pride career is definitely one of the, I'll definitely say one of the best overall MMA runs, I think, for a heavyweight. And it's filled with, oops, sorry, there's a fly here. It's just filled with excitement and just some of the best fights in general. I don't think he ever had a bad fight in Pride. I think none of his fight, not counting the draw, the two draws.
Okay, I actually think the second draw is actually quite a fun fight, but I was about to say, that first fight with Takada is like, I tried to watch that.
I'm not even actually. They had special rules where like there was no kicks to the head or something, or no kicks to the ground.
I think the special rules in the I'm not 100% sure. I think the special rules in the first Takada fight were about there wasn't going to be any judging, and if it was, I'm assuming if it's the same as the Wanderlei one, that when you went to the ropes, they stood you back up. But the real reason that's boring is because Takada not a great fighter, and every time he gets in trouble, he pulls guard. Something happened, which, can I just say this? Sorry, something happened which blew my mind. I do not understand how over this guy was. He got a pop from getting a takedown. Okay, I get that. He is the only guy I've ever seen who got a pop from sitting to guard, and it's like a loud one. Like, he falls to guard, and people are like, yeah!
I'll tell you this about Takada. So Takada was so his whole thing was that he was being groomed to be like before Sakuraba, because before Sakuraba actually, Takada was going to be the guy who was supposed to be the Gracie hunter, the Gracie killer, and he was supposed to be the golden boy, the golden child. Basically, Sakuraba's career was supposed to be what Takada was supposed to how that was supposed to go.
Because Takada was the way more like famous pro wrestler.
Yes, and when he was in New Japan Young Lion, he was actually like, he was just over. So Young Lions are not supposed to be like over in any way, but for some reason he just connected to the audience day one for whatever reason, and then he went to UWFI and they basically built a promotion around him and Gary Albright. But Takada was the Japanese star for them, and he also became well known because he had a match with Koji Kitao, which was supposed to be a worked match for that promotion, and then he wound up shooting on Kitao. If you watch the match, he gets legit he legit knocks out Kitao, and it's a really fascinating thing. Chris, you're probably very familiar with that whole thing, right?
I mean, if I'm not familiar, I might need to watch it for research purposes.
And then Takada was supposed to be, and I also think that Cro Cop fight, if you came to me and told me that was one of those Pride worked MMA whatever bouts, I would not be surprised.
I would be, because I'd be surprised that someone would plan to be that boring and unentertaining.
Well, that's the reason why I can't believe Pride, which prided itself on basically being pro wrestling but being real. It was, if actually a bunch of Takada's fight, I think it's suspected a lot of some of Takada's wins in Pride may have been either close to pro wrestling or legit worked pro wrestling.
They paid Mark Coleman to take a dive.
Yeah.
But Rickson actually did get knocked down by a knee. Okay, against Takada. That was not a work.
you can definitely say that the Mark Coleman fight was some type of fixed.
I want to tell this. Oh, but yeah, the Gracie fight, Rickson Gracie fight. So it's entirely possible that Gracie may have thought it was a pro wrestling match up until that knee, and then when he realized, oh shit, this is not a pro wrestling match, it then became like a shoot match. Because that did happen.
I doubt that. I because they've already had one fight. I really doubt that. I just think Rickson couldn't strike. But yeah. But going back to what do you call it? Going back to Cro Cop's career. I think the thing is like the thing that could have been a pro wrestling angle in terms of how his career actually played out, but was actually even more impressive because it's real life, is the both the Kevin Randleman loss and the reaction to it. Because Kevin Randleman, not on his, I think he's on a 2-fight losing streak, although they are to Rampage and Sakuraba, so it's not like he's losing to jobbers. But Kevin Randleman, absurdly fantastic and accomplished NCAA wrestler, wrestler of the century at Ohio, I believe.
The Ohio State University.
Yeah. And he's actually got a he's passed away now, unfortunately. But he's actually got a YouTube video with highlights of his stuff called The Unbreakable Kevin Randleman, to a song about him. But if you want to watch that, but very super fast, just super fast and strong. Can shoot from almost like a regular wrestler because he can cover so much distance. Very good ground and pound with skyscraper knees that look like they will kill someone. Had been trained, but the thing is, he was training with Mark Coleman's gym, where it was sort of like it would train wrestlers to do ground and pound. But the issue is that Mark Coleman's gym, it's not like, say, Frank Shamrock's Alliance, where they've got like strikers and grapplers in to sort of train people to be well-rounded. Randleman doesn't really have much striking coaching. He doesn't have much grappling coaching, which is why, despite the fact that he's a wrestler who wants to take people down, he gets submitted a lot because his submission defense isn't on par with his takedowns and his punching. He's also not huge for a heavyweight, but he has to fight at heavyweight because if he cuts all the way to light heavyweight, then he will just gas really quickly. So Randleman not considered a big opponent for Cro Cop. I'm not sure if this is a what do you call it? If this is just a rumor and it never happened, but I once saw someone say that Cro Cop referred to the fight as if a village football team is trying to take on a national football team. In soccer, in association football. So he was kind of overlooking Randleman in terms of because if he won this fight, then he would face Fedor. So of course you're going to overlook the guy who's kind of washed up. But Randleman had been training with Chuck Liddell, and Chuck Liddell had been teaching him this old, I think it's an old karate thing, because we did get taught this in karate, but to sort of push the guy's shoulder as he's throwing a kick. And on the day of the fight, he asked Chuck Liddell, "Hey, could I just throw a left hook instead of pushing?" Randleman's like, "Yeah, you can do that." Not Randleman. Liddell's like, "You can do that." So Randleman's up against Cro Cop. He tries to take him down, doesn't work. Cro Cop stuffs it. They get separated because they're just against the fence doing nothing, or against the ropes doing nothing. I think it's the corner actually. But then Cro Cop is about to throw a kick, and Randleman throws this absurdly fast left hook. This is how fast it is. It's in response to the tells for a kick, but Cro Cop's foot doesn't leave the ground. His kicking foot doesn't leave the ground. I actually had to play this at quarter speed to work out that it actually was a response to a kick, because I can only tell because Cro Cop's turned his right leg out to set up for the throw and the kick, because he gets hit by the left hook before his foot even leaves the ground. It doesn't actually knock him out; it just knocks him down, but he's really badly hurt. Randleman jumps on him. Cro Cop's hanging on for dear life, but Randleman will not be denied and punches his way free and knocks him out really badly with ground and pound. So absolutely catastrophic loss for Cro Cop, one of the biggest upsets in MMA history. Randleman will go on to have his fight with Fedor, where he nearly catapults Fedor on his head and gets submitted just after doing that, because Fedor judo magics his way out of getting knocked out from that. But Cro Cop is distraught. His family are distraught. He's never been knocked out like this, not even in kickboxing. Like, he's been finished, but he's never been like knocked out. Um, and so his wife is in tears when he comes back. But 2 days after he comes back, 2 days after he gets knocked out, he does what you shouldn't do, and he goes on like a long run and he starts training, and he phones up Pride FC and he says to them, they only have like a handshake deal at this point. It's all very informal. And he goes, "I will never fight for you to get again unless you give me a fight this month. This month, you give me a fight. He wants to obliterate the image of him getting knocked out. He's like, I'm a huge star in Japan. Give me a fight this month, or I'll never fight for you again." They give him the unremarkable Kanehara, who he goes to decision.
Hiromitsu Kanehara.
Yeah. He's tough. He goes to a decision with a Cro Cop who is really loading up on punches and trying to knock him out. But after that is a 12-month period between that and the Ibrahim Magomedov, who's the last guy before he fights Fedor. So he's fighting 7 times in that period, basically once every 2 months. And after the Kanehara fight, everything is a first round stoppage. Like, and I say first round stoppage. Pride had a 10-minute first round. Nothing gets beyond like the 5-minute mark, like including avenging his loss over Randleman and knocking out Mark Coleman, who was Randleman's coach, and knocking out Alexander Emelianenko, who's Fedor's brother, and knocking out Ibrahim Magomedov, who was Fedor's teammate. And so he has obliterated the Randleman's loss in people's eyes. He is very, very angry, and he wants his fight with Fedor. So that's when he gets his fight. That's when he gets his fight with Fedor. He has, like, he's knocked out Fedor's brother and his coach. So Fedor probably didn't want him to go after any more of his friends and relatives.
It's funny though, when you said pro wrestling, I thought you were going to bring up the him beating Alexander Emelianenko and then going on to face Fedor, because that is like pro wrestling in itself. You beat my brother, my teammate, and then you go on to face me, and then actually Pride kind of built the whole Fedor lead up, that whole lead up on as that he beat these two people connected to Fedor, and they eventually had their big match. I also want to bring up as well that when he submitted Randleman, I think this is when he actually started training jiu-jitsu. I think he was training with Verdum, if I remember correctly.
He was, and Fedor was training with Hoost. You can't make this up, because some of it happens in the future. Because Fedor trains striking with the guy who the guy who kept Cro Cop from the Grand Prix title. But Cro Cop is training grappling with the guy who kept Fedor from who broke Fedor's streak. The guy who will break Fedor's streak. So you cannot make this up. But their fight is it was voted fight of the decade by Sports Illustrated of like the 2000s. It is the best MMA heavyweight fight ever. It is fantastic. The drama is amazing. This is the greatest Fedor ever got. This is maybe not like I'd say Barnett 3 is Cro Cop's finest hour, but the Cro Cop is definitely like this is definitely one of the best versions of Cro Cop ever as well. But it is amazing, and like Fedor is the best part is that Fedor's strategy is a counter to Cro Cop's strategy, but it also makes it really exciting because he has to take away the kicks and make Cro Cop work and tire by getting him to go back, but that means he has to walk forward all the time and keep the action at a really high pace. And so Fedor's like going forward. He's doing his thing where he throws like a lead overhand and tries to clinch, and he's always having to watch out for that left straight from Cro Cop, which Cro Cop can throw as a counter. And he gets hit by it like twice and is fine, but it's still a pretty heavy punch. But ironically, Fedor's actually, even though Cro Cop is known as the guy who will force you into a corner and then kick you in the head, I'd actually say Fedor is better built for the pressure strategy and cutting people off, because his punches are very looping, so they can keep people on the fence, on the ropes. Like, people will have to walk one or the other, and he will hit them with a looping punch. But Cro Cop's punches are his main punch is straight as an arrow, and his right hook he won't throw it a lot by itself, which I think is one of his main weaknesses, because that would have made it a lot easier to like herd people and keep them on the ropes if he threw that right hook more.
You know what? Come to think of it, Josh, going back to the whole thing about the Fedor versus Cro Cop fight being the fight of the decade by Sports Illustrated, which obviously, in case anybody needs a refresher, it's one of the most famous sports publications in the world. That's based out of the United States, obviously, New York City to be exact. But still, though, there's also the fact that Fedor was named the fighter of the decade in the 2000s, when obviously the 2000s was the first full decade for mixed martial arts. But do y'all think that Mirko Cro would be a very close second to that fighter of the decade discussion in the 2000s?
If he had beaten Fedor, he probably could have at least made a case for it. I think the difference is that I think I'd probably say you'd have to look at like his, because the thing is, it's like there's no comparison for Fedor's reign of dominance in the 2000s that I can think of off the top of my head, of like someone going that long, beating that good competition, and like going practically undefeated. Whereas like a lot of other guys may be fighting in better divisions but not having that same run of dominance. But the thing is like even if Cro Cop had beaten Fedor, which he gets very close to in this fight, there's a moment where he comes so tantalizingly close to licking that brass ring, but he uh, he would have had the losses to Big Nog, a guy who Fedor had beaten twice. He would have had the lost to Kevin Randleman, a guy Fedor has beaten without also losing to him. Fedor doesn't have the losses. I think would have weakened his case even if he had beaten Fedor. And I think it maybe would have fallen to a third guy.
I actually want to ask you, yeah, before we close up on his pride career, yeah, had he, like, I think it's funny that that was the biggest, the two best heavyweights at the time, and they both go to a some people say it was a close decision, and then some people think that Fedor, basically took the whole thing. But
I don't think it's sorry.
I was just gonna say, what that is one of the biggest what ifs in MMA. I think is if Cro Cop had beaten Fedor. And it would have, I wish we could have like a Doctor Strange multiversing where we could see what happens if Cro Cop does beat Fedor. Does Cro Cop, does Fedor then go to UFC? Maybe does he stay in Pride? What happens like with that whole thing? And like, what does that do to change Fedor's career, having his only distinct loss at that point? And well, sorry, go ahead, Jess. I mean, Josh. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think it would have been a big what if. I think because Cro Cop actually comes really close to it. At one point, Fedor is pushing him back, and Cro Cop doubles up on the left straight, and the first one hits and hurts Fedor. Second one really hurts him, and Fedor starts retreating, and he's bleeding now. And Cro Cop smells blood in the water, approaches, and there's just a fantastic sequence. Fedor throws this absolutely massive right overhand. Cro Cop nearly falls over from trying to dodge it. He throws this left high kick, which barely misses, and Cro Cop nearly falls over from throwing it. But he's losing his balance, and that's when Fedor is able to get him down. And that is the turning point, because from then on, Fedor is able to batter him with ground and pound for basically 5 minutes. And then when he gets him down in the second round and keeps doing it, then that's when when Fedor basically permanently takes a fight into his camp. But assuming that say that left high kick had hit, or if Fedor hadn't been able to back him off or take him down at that point, and Cro Cop is able to finish a hurt Fedor, I think what happens is instant rematch. Because even though they didn't make the stars fight the big names, like fight each other as much as they made them fight cans, in Pride they did do an instant rematch when Wanderlei Silva lost to Ricardo Arona in similar circumstances, long running, or what would have been similar circumstances to Fedor losing to Cro Cop. And long running champion loses to a guy, and then they do an instant rematch.
I'm so actually surprised though that like that Pride or even Bellator when they got Cro Cop and they got Fedor that they didn't rerun that match. I'm surprised that it's one of those. It just happened once, never happened again. Because there are just some matches that just seemingly happen. We've gotten Lyoto Machida, Phil Davis, I think twice now for some reason. We got Bader Machida twice and Bader Davis maybe 3 times. Yet Fedor and Cro Cop has only happened once in this lifetime.
I think that's because I think if Cro Cop, because Cro Cop had that stroke right after the Roy Nelson fight,
Yes.
and that was what made him quit for good, because he'd kind of been pushing his luck, because you want to end on a win, but he'd been on the biggest streak of his life, including avenging.
But I thought that Fedor and Cro Cop had I think Cro Cop signed with Bellator, or was he a free agent at least after I think he was, because I think Fedor had signed with Bellator before then, and then Cro Cop was with Rizin, but he was probably free to do Bellator at that point. So I'm just surprised that there was no sort of, even Rizin, I'm surprised didn't even try to listen. Rizin was they redid Bob Sapp and Akabono. So I'm surprised I'm surprised Sakakibara is like, oh, I have Fedor and I have Cro Cop. Why don't we do a fight with them or something? I'm really just surprised that it's just one of the things. Was it just, I don't know what it was. I don't know what
I think they probably would have done it after the Roy Nelson fight, if not for the stroke. I think they were probably leading up to it, and then Cro Cop suddenly retires.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So who do you think would have won if they had that fight then?
Oh, Fedor. I think Fedor, despite his having a glass chin at this point, I think that Cro Cop has gotten he's gotten a lot slower. He's still strong striking, but it's not as strong as it used to be. He can, if you are prepared for his punches, you can definitely take them. And I think Fedor, who would have just worn out Cro Cop, and maybe even knocked him out by the second round. That's my belief. Chris, do you have a thought? If they had a rematch, do you think Cro Cop or Fedor would have won?
Nowadays, if there were to have been a Fedor Cro Cop 3,
two.
Oh yeah, if there would have been a Fedor Cro Cop 2, I think Cro Cop would have definitely won. But I think it would have probably replaced the Roy Nelson fight as Mirko's last as a mixed martial artist.
Actually, in a perfect universe, and Josh, maybe you could agree with this, if Cro Cop hadn't suffered that stroke, that would be the perfect retirement fight for both of them.
I would definitely agree that it would have been a fantastic retirement fight for both of them. Even though I'm not usually a fan of running back these old man fights, just because it's never because you'd have to always like clarify. Okay, the second fight is when they're completely shot. So
but if they're both shot, I think it's if they're both shot, then I think it's even playing field.
I don't think so, because there are levels to like being shot, and if I'm going to be completely honest, I think Cro Cop would win, because I think, even though you're right that his speed has fallen off in a way that it hasn't for Fedor, I think I think Cro Cop resembles his old self better than Fedor does, because Fedor doesn't feel like, quite apart from the fact that his chin is like in pieces, even though he's retained the speed, he doesn't strike as well as he used to. The discipline in his striking isn't as disciplined as he used to be, which is really what you needed to. Makes a difference against Cro Cop. The discipline, the willingness to put up the full guard from the full check from the kicks, where you're checking with both your arm and your leg at the same time, so that the body and head are both protected. The willingness to do that and then be ready to try and avoid the left straight. That discipline is what made the difference. Whereas I think that the fact that Fedor's now just will go in and swing big overhands and get caught, I think that's a recipe for
knowing Bellator's luck with some of their main events, assuming if it took place in Bellator, ideally it would have been great if it happened in Rizin. But if it happened in Bellator, I would predict no contest, a groin strike in the first minute,
or eye poke, or something. Eye poke, or something equally disastrous. Yeah. So now you are right. Wait. No, it's not inevitable. It is likely, but it's not inevitable. They did have that what do you call it? Rampage Wanderlei 4. That
Oh
was
yes,
that
but
that but no, but they'd have so there's a chance it might be good, but you just have commentary talk really stupidly over it.
yeah.
So
So that's that we're gonna close off on his Pride career. Let's talk about his UFC run, which twice, but he did have that one lone fight against Gonzaga too, which I'll consider part of his second run. I'm not so sure of the whole backstory behind that one lone fight, but whatever. We're gonna combine that there.
I mean, come think of it, I think the only reason why he got into and why he got back into the UFC for that one fight was basically shits and giggles, but also because of the fact that, he just wanted not only one last go round, but to basically go out with a bang, even though unfortunately he basically retired from the promotion and had another doping violation and basically had an issue with Reebok on not wearing the Croatian flag on his trunks, which ended up with the Reebokalypse, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But still, dude had to take a couple of years suspension after that last UFC belt, but we can basically add the Cro fight to the second UFC run.
So yeah, Josh. I guess if there's, I unfortunately, now that you made me think, I think about it. His UFC career pretty much was, I guess it kind of sucked. With his only highlight, I hate to say it, is him being knocked out by Gabriel Gonzaga as like one of the most like never gonna believe it actually would happen knockouts. Because
the worst. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna just say because you see with the Randleman one, here's the thing: Randleman at least had power. You could tell this guy's athletic. Gonzaga was a jujitsu guy and like should have had no business ever standing up with Cro at all. And that fight was clearly supposed to be there for Cro to win, but the complete polar opposite happened. But
also Randleman had, like, apart from his astonishing wrestling career, Randleman had been UFC champion. So Randleman was just kind of like not in a great place in his career. Gonzaga, that is like the peak of his, well, it's the peak of Randleman's career as well, but like that seemed to Gonzaga had not risen to those heights before. So that's even more of an upset. But I think the other reason it marching in for a prime is that I think that's where Cro gets a pretty bad leg injury. So that starts the beginning of the end.
But yeah, assess his UFC career with any highlights or maybe the opposite of highlights, whatever, low lights. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. I think that Cro had a great career. I think that I would have liked to see him fight guys like I would have loved a Big Nog 2, which he nearly got, but Josh Barnett snipped Big Nog out of that decision, so we got Barnett 3 as well instead, which was still a good fight. Um, I would have liked to see him fight guys like I would have loved a fatal rematch, even though he lost. I would have loved to see a fatal rematch. I'd have loved to see a Big Nog 2. I would have loved to see him fight some of the more elite competition in Pride more, even though he did fight some really good competition. But I think of his career overall as really fantastic. But I think of him as a Pride guy. I think of him as a guy who went to Japan and was a huge star in Japan. So the fact that I consider his UFC run kind of bad doesn't really affect me. It's the same with Wanderlei Silva. He was a Pride guy. He was a big star in Japan. He was the guy. He was the steroid monster who held the light heavyweight belt for ages. I don't consider the fact that Wanderlei Silva didn't have a great UFC career to be more important than the fact that he was a great Pride fighter. In the same way that if someone like Gamrot suddenly, like, who's doing great in the UFC lightweight right now, but if Gamrot suddenly goes on like a 5-fight losing streak and retires, I'll still consider him to have a successful career just because how good he was in KSW. The UFC is the highest stage nowadays. Wasn't back then when Cro was in Pride, but we shouldn't let it dictate whether we see a guy's career as ultimately successful. Yeah,
I think
that's just my opinion.
I think also, I've heard theories behind the injury is one theory I've heard. That's why his UFC career was not successful. But I've also heard that fighting from the ring to the cage, his whole fight game was not, he couldn't adapt it because, you know, one of the things that he would always do was circle or wait for his, he would, so when you're in the ring, obviously you have to kind of really, if you want to like, you know, move around the ring, you have to move in a distinctive, most of the time straight or diagonal. You not a lot of circling so much as opposed to UFC cage where you're kind of forced to because of the way that it's just constructed. I don't know. Have you heard about that, or you think there's any theory, any possible thing behind that? That just because that the cage and just the structure itself and being smaller as well played into why his career was not as successful.
I think the big factor is that he was never, even though he was the guy who backed up people into the corner and then got them out, the fact that the corner is a harsher angle helped a lot with that because, like I mentioned earlier, that he had three weaknesses, and then I didn't elaborate on the third one, and then I mentioned slightly later than that the not using the right hook as much, and I think the fact that he didn't, because he's so left side dominant that he didn't really have as much tools to stop people from circling off. Um, so that was a problem, but it becomes an even bigger problem when you lose that harsher angles. So that, yeah, I think the bigger problem was not even just the size, but the fact that he's losing the what do you call it? He's losing the thing he had adapted to, and having to come up with a solution to a new problem at a time where he's falling off athletically. But if I'm going to be honest, I think that if Pride had had a cage, I think he would have adapted to the cage in Pride because he's adapted. He made the hard part. He adapted to the takedowns by developing a really good sprawl and being really strong on the clinch, developing a really good clinch. He adapted to Barnett's clinch offense in the second fight by like bracing on his chest, keeping away. He was a guy who could adapt. And if we were to go back to what your original question was, which was the who is the best kickboxing trainer in the UFC. I think whether you think it was Cro Cop or Adesanya, I think the fact remains that they both adapted amazingly. They both had styles which are unusual enough in kickboxing that, and with little tweaking, they got them to work in MMA as well. And I think that adaptation is the difference. It's not how, because there are better kickboxers than both of them in kickboxing. That I think would I mean, maybe they'd come over to MMA as well, but the difference that they made was that they could adapt. It wasn't, even though the kickboxing was a really strong weapon for them, it wasn't the only weapon they have, and they have ways of dealing with other weapons, like dealing with stuff that isn't kickboxing in the MMA cage and the MMA ring in Pride. So yeah. I think he would have adapted had he been in there earlier in his career, rather than having to make that change on top of falling off athletically, on top of having some bad losses. I think he would have adapted eventually.
Gotcha. Chris, I think two of the worst fights maybe ever in UFC history. Unfortunately, Cro Cop was involved in them, and it was the Pat Barry and Frank Mir matches. Because I was actually in a theater when the Pat Barry match happened because it was the same. I think it was the same match where I think that was when Roy McDonald made his debut against Carlos Condit. And I think the main event was Liddell and Franklin. And Franklin was a replacement because I think I forgot who Liddell's original opponent was, but that was the one where Franklin knocked out Liddell with his broken arm. And Pat Barry and Cro Cop basically were just hugging and just like slapping hands the entire time. And supposedly because Pat Barry had so much respect for Cro Cop, whatever, it was basically like 3 rounds of nothing until the Cro Cop, finally choked him out in the third round. And then the Frank Mir match, I don't think that was the main event. It was either the main event or co-main event of that one. Again, this is post. I believe I think this is post injury Frank Mir, if I remember correctly, or if not, it's going to happen like eventually. And what a boring, it was basically a stare down until somehow Frank Mir just knocked out Cro Cop of a knee. I still don't even remember how it happens, but.
Well, I mean, to be honest, and I'm sorry, Josh, that we're not really, I mean, I don't really truly know you. I'm pretty sure Andrew does, but we have another person in the journalist game, Charles Jewett, CJ Sobukaku, who basically referred to the Frank Mir fight that happened in Indianapolis, Indiana. USA, home to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But still, he refers to that Mir fight as one of the worst fights he's ever seen. Am I right or am I right?
Terrible. It's absolutely that entire car was actually dog shit. Okay. Oh my god. I remember I saw this at a bar. I saw this at a bar in Long Island. I remember this one because this was Matt Serra's retirement fight as well. Yeah, this was a dog shit card. If you go to Wikipedia, just look at that
Like
main
from
at that
top
main
to
card.
bottom, out like from 1 to 10. How bad was it?
This has got to be like 2 or 3.
3 split decisions on one card. That's either going to be a really good card or a really bad card.
Yeah, this was a dog shit card, and I can't believe I remember now they did main events, Cro Cop and Mir. So yeah, well, I guess his hello lights for me were Gonzaga in these 2 fights, but I want to hear from you, Chris. Do you have anything positive? If not, do you have anything negative to say about Cro Cop's UFC career?
Well, I think that his UFC career was a bit disappointing on the fact that it wasn't as memorable as his Pride career because of the fact that he just faced not a lot of backlash. I mean, yeah, he had some highlights. Obviously, we can forget about the Pat Barry submission win because it was more of a low light, but he did knock out Eddie the Manic Hispanic Sanchez. He knocked out Mustafa Al Turk, which really, who didn't knock out Mustafa Al Turk at that time? And obviously, he defeated Anthony the Hippo Petros. But other than that, he just had losses on top of losses. I mean, Junior Dos Santos, Chet Congo, Gabriel Gonzaga, Frank Mir, Brendan Schaub, Roy Nelson the first time.
That's all you have to say, Brendan Schaub. That's all you have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, screw that guy. I'm not even gonna mention. That's the only time I'll mention.
Roy Nelson.
You know what? I will give Brendan Schaub a little bit of defense here. I think he went on the record and said that in his prime he wouldn't have stood a chance against Cro Cop, which
absolutely
is a yeah. So that's some nice self awareness. But yeah. it is kind of an embarrassing loss. But
yeah. Again, screw that guy. I'm not mentioning it again after that. Right. Still, point of the matter is his UFC run to me was a disappointment because for a lot of fight fans, especially when Cro Cop came into the UFC that first time after winning the Pride Grand Prix the previous September, people were really hoping, oh, are we going to get the same Cro Cop that he had? I mean, are we going to get the same Cro Cop that we've seen in Pride? Are we going to get the same Cro Cop that pretty much ran the roost in Japan? No, you weren't. And even more so, he was more known for basically, I mean, it's like I mentioned beforehand, when we was beginning to talk about this, the last time he was in the UFC, yeah, he beat Gabriel Gonzaga, but he had a lot of drama getting out of the UFC. He had the 2-year suspension from USADA when USADA was just starting to flex their muscle, because of beating Gonzaga, but coming in, looking built. And then he had the issue with Reebok because they wouldn't let him wear the Croatian flag on his trunks. And then obviously that's what led to a bitter divorce from the UFC after that one fight, but didn't really lead to anything good for him. I mean, that UFC run wasn't really anything good for him because, yeah, he had that one title eliminator against Gabriel Gonzaga the first time, and he lost that. And the rest of the time there, he was just another fighter.
I think it reminds me a bit. It's like, when Shogun got into the UFC, and this is similar circumstances. Pride's fallen apart, so everyone's jettisoned to the UFC. It's the same thing. It's he's hopped into the UFC. Everyone thinks because with Cro Cop it was Fedor's not going to be here, so Cro Cop's obviously going to wipe out all opposition and become champion. With Shogun it was like, okay, his best friend now no longer owns a title, so he's going to wipe out competition and become champion. But same thing happened. For Shogun it was pre-existing injuries. But they get upset. Fedor, no, yeah, Cro Cop got upset by uh Gonzaga and got head kicked, and Shogun got upset by Forrest Griffin and got rear naked choked. Probably a bit less humiliating for Shogun because Forrest Griffin was a better fighter than Gonzaga, but yes, same thing. Like they got massively upset. But Shogun had that he was able to salvage it because he had that run to the title and beat Machida as an old man. Beat him at the last possible second to become UFC champion just before Jones would make that basically impossible for anyone else to take for the next better part of a decade. Um, but Cro
Um,
Cop didn't have that. Cro Cop just fell out the organization. Why
yeah.
did I'm surprised that they let him go. So what after those two fights? I didn't do any research on why they let him go. Was it like contract dispute of the after the Czech Congo fight, or was it a
It,
because he went to Dream, didn't he?
yeah.
Um,
I'll try to find out anything, but right now I'm just gonna guesstimate. I wonder. So this was, let me just double check on the year. So okay, 2008, 2007. I wonder 2007, both 2007. Excuse me. I wonder. So he just had the Eddie Sanchez and Gonzaga and then Congo. I wonder if it was like a 3-fight deal or something. And then after the 2 losses, maybe he was gonna negotiate, but then Dreams came about, and it's like, you know, because if you look at so he fought his first UFC his first run in the UFC, his last fight was September 8th of 2007. Then he fought in Dream and March 15th. That's kind of a big, that's months, that's a long time between fighting. So I think may have been his contract ran up, and then he decided to go back. He got the offer from Sakakibara. He always said that Japan was like his second home, and that a lot of the fighters who did fight in Pride who did leave, because of shit that was going on. When Sakakibara, when Dream and then Rizin came about, they all came back as soon as they got the call. A lot of them were really loyal to Sakakibara when he got his shit together. They all loved him as a boss.
yeah.
And so I'll try to find anything on that, but that's my belief. That maybe that his contract was let me see what I can find here. In the meantime, I want to also bring up the problem with also of his UFC career. And so what sucks is that, and this is a big problem now. Well, now more, I don't know if it was then, but the problem is that like when fighters are brought in with a big hype, and then as soon as they lose, like suddenly fans and especially now UFC just turns on them. They become like, yeah, and I think one of the best recent examples I could think of potentially was not Kobe Covington. Fuck, what's his
Justin Gaethje.
no. Sage Northcutt. Sage Northcutt was brought in with a ton of hype in the UFC. He was promoted like crazy, and then he loses one fight, and then suddenly he's like, it's like you don't hear anything about him anymore about his when he was fighting. So
of course, because that's how they were. I mean, sad. I feel sad for Sage Northcutt because his popularity continues to dwindle, and not because of the fact that he's a part of that damn one championship. But still,
Has he
point
even
of the
had a
matter
fight
is,
since he got his skull broken in one?
no, he has
nope.
not fought since he got KO'd by Cosmo Alexandre. But still, though, I think when it comes down to the UFC, they have issues with fighters trying. I mean, if you're not Conor McGregor, they basically have an issue with you. They basically treat you like you're not worthy of being in their presence.
I see.
You know what that reminds me of? Because I think you're exactly right, Chris. Because that reminds me of I think it was Hellboy Joachim Hansen. He said he never wanted to sign up with the UFC because he said the UFC didn't respect him, didn't respect people, but Japanese fans he felt were comparatively loyal. So I think you're right. I think there's that feeling that if you especially if you became a big star in Japan, that it's worth it going back there. as opposed to fighting in the UFC, where people only have, for better and for worse, people only have memories 2 fights ago.
Oh yeah.
It only takes 2 fights for people to forget, and that could work to a fighter's advantage. Like, remember when everyone thought that Oliveira was a quitter, and now he's had like 3 fights in a row where he had to fight through adversity, and now people are just calling him, oh, he's gonna get knocked down in round 1. That just makes him enter his killer mode. That just gets you to the second stage of the boss fight.
Okay, here's the closest thing I can find. This is from MMA Junkie, 2009. So it says that Cro Cop, who returned from a year-long absence from the UFC to beat Mustafa. Wait, hold on. Let's see.
Mustafa Al-Turk.
Oh no, I'm just reading the whole thing because I actually may have okay. Oh, okay. So here, okay. So this is what Dana White said. So Dana White, I'm assuming he fucking told me, White told Yahoo Sports, the first time in the history of the company I do one, a contract over the phone. He promised me a 3-fight deal and he fucked me. Cro Cop later told media in his home country, Croatia, that there was no such deal and that White had fallen for rumors. This is right after his fight with Congo, but and signing with Dream. So it seems like, if I'm reading this correctly, he was supposed to re-sign with UFC potentially, but then signed with Dream, despite verbally telling White that I was going to sign with you. I think this is how I'm reading this correctly. So that seems to be like what it was, what it may have been, which is interesting because usually people who kind of do have to kind of screw Dana White over don't tend to get usually get second chances, but somehow I don't know, he was the exception to the rule for whatever reason.
Well, to be fair, the UFC have never had a would call it exactly a choice when it comes to heavyweights. There's only about 3 of them that are exciting at a time. So
oh, that's true. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's anything else about this whole Cro Cop thing.
Because it's I mean, I've got no doubt that eventually it will pick up again and we'll start getting a decent heavyweight division together again. But you can't help but compare like the stuff like the Volkov
listen,
fight.
Oh my, so listen,
all those pride fights I was watching.
I'm on the MMA Junkie message boards from 2009. So
proceed with caution, Andrew.
And you can see a lot of these people are like on Dana White's UFC side. This one guy says, I don't know why you're upset. Cro Cop helped you sell the arena. He's not a top 10 heavyweight. If it makes you feel any better, cue the Gonzaga head kick. Dana White really doesn't have any reason to be upset. All you have to do is play clips of Cro Cop getting owned by Gonzaga and Congo. Let's see. He was one of the best heavyweights at one time. That time is over. He isn't currently even in top 15. That's not even debatable. It's debatable if he's even top 20. But good for him. He gets to say he won in the UFC and make more money beating up cans in Japan and hiding from every decent fighter alive. So basically, MMA fans were no different in 2009 than they are in 2022. Yeah. Is what I am reading right now.
That never changes.
Oh man,
and that's why I said, Andrew, proceed with caution because these idiots nowadays don't have anything. I mean, these idiots don't really have anything to say nice about fighters that are just busting their humps compared to how it was back in 2009 when the same thing happened.
Exactly. Just asking, in terms of because we've been doing this for like nearly 2 hours.
Of course.
When are you guys thinking of? Because I haven't been on this for like 2 years. I haven't been because I think I came in for the Manuel Cap thing and then never not since then. So when do you guys want to wrap this up?
How much more time do you have left?
Wrap it up.
I can get like another 10-15 minutes maybe.
Okay, we
can wrap it up in the next 20 if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Let's talk about the final arc of his career, his Rizin career, where he did not suffer one loss. As you said before, it was his longest streak, Rizin and then Bellator, and some other independent promotions. I think IGF was also involved in that as well.
Mm.
But
And
his
some fund in Russia, of
yeah,
course.
but his rise in open weight domination is one of the most fun sets of fights. That entire tournament was just a fun romp in general, and I was lucky to have gone to day 1 and day 2 of the semifinals and then the finals of that tournament. And I don't know, did anybody ever get to see Cro Cop live? Josh, you ever get to see him live? Or
I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not, because by the time I would have joined the sport, I think he probably was either about to retire or had retired. I think I got interested in the sport like around. I think it feels like I'm gonna think, when we did what do you call it, when was Stipe, I'm just
yeah,
gonna look, when was Stipe
that was a real true MMA fight to have made at some
Daniel
point.
Cormier too.
Stipe
So I
Miocic.
would have been in just I would have gotten in the sport just before he retired.
Gotcha. Chris, you ever got to see Cro Cop live? Probably not. He never came to Texas, probably, right?
I mean, obviously, I never got to see him compete live and in person like you have, but I did get a chance to see him compete live from the comfort of the chair that I'm sitting in, watching him basically mow through the entire Street Fighter roster on that journey to become the Rising Grand Prix champion in 2016.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so yeah, so Josh, if you happen to check out any of his fights in Rizin, whether it be the open weight or his singles matches.
The only fight I've seen from him in Ryzen was the finale of the what do you call it, of the that tournament where he beats Amir Al Yakbari, which is pretty notable because almost everyone else in that tournament, I don't want to say like a can, but most of those people were like kind of post prime. Um, but
I'll say this. King Mo. Well, this is before. This is when after and then after this fight, like was when his like downward spiral kind of went with King Mo. Like
yeah.
that in terms of like that was a compelling fight just because King Mo was he can knock out people. I mean, he was completely undersized against Cro Cop. But yeah, listen, I was there for the Bruto fight. Bruto had advanced the way he did because what he would do is he would just smother his opponents like sumo style and just do that. And
to be fair, a sumo Rikishi comes in with so many disadvantages to competing in MMA that the very fact that that Burrito was able to put 2 wins in a row is actually quite impressive.
Oh yes. I remember, as soon as he tried doing that against Cro Cop, he tried to hold him against the turnbuckle. The audience started booing, and then Cro Cop just gave him a knee to the liver, and like it just caused Baruto to go down and just like fetal position, and just like yeah, you definitely knew that there was a big technical disparity between the two, regardless of size. But the Ali Akbari one was interesting just because Ali Akbari just being that we thought, oh, this guy's going to try to wrestle Cro Cop the entire time. And it was entirely possible, but no, Ali Akbari didn't even get a successful takedown on him and just got destroyed by him. But yeah, I thought that he, after winning that open weight Grand Prix, I thought he was going to retire then, but then he would have 3 more fights, 2 in Rizin. So I asked you, Joshua. So this is the tail end of his career. He wins the open weight Grand Prix, has 3 more fights altogether. What do you think about the end of his MMA run?
I think that it's interesting that Satoshi Ishii, he beat him twice, and now Satoshi Ishii not only like trains out of Cro Cop's camp, but if I'm correct, I think he has Croatian citizenship now. So Satoshi Ishii, that is like what do you call it? That is like a genuine friendship that started with back-to-back beatings there.
And what other sport could that happen where you beat somebody by kicking them in the face and they become your friend after?
I guess it could happen in kickboxing. But what do you call it? But Cro Cop's got it covered there as well. But I think that this is about as much when you are completely like out of your athletic prime. This is about as much as you can ask for in like a last arc to your career. Like, um, he avenged two of his losses against Roy Nelson and Gabriel Gonzaga. He made a friend. He won an open weight Grand Prix, which kind of throwback to what I said was his other finest hour when he won the Pride open weight Grand Prix, the last one. Finishing with the Josh Barnett win, so a throwback to his greatest moment. So avenging his worst moments, reenacting his greatest moments, um, and even more impressively, this is almost everything except for the Roy Nelson one, and Roy Nelson still got a brick chin, was by finish. He has a finishing rate of something like 89%,
Yeah.
which, considering how many of those were like consider, especially in the first half of his career, how many of those were good competition for heavyweight. That is really impressive.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys he couldn't finish are guys like Roy Nelson, um, very durable. Um, Fujita in their second fight, very durable. Um, and Kanahara, surprisingly durable. So, but his decisions are mainly
Mhm.
coming against guys who can really take a shot. So, even in a division of where everyone can finish, he stands apart as one of its best ever finishers. Like that's the thing. Um, that's the thing. Like that's what's really impressive about Cro Cop, because you can get introduced to him. Okay, he's the guy who head kicks. It is really hard to be a guy who can consistently get head kick finishes when the other guy knows you're a head kicker. But he did it. He had his system of getting to them. So even though other guys knew that he was a really dangerous finisher, he would get the finish by head kick or left straight or body kick. Just really good at even if you knew what was coming. So people like Fedor were trying to game plan around what they knew what was coming. Even Wanderlei Silva in their first fight was trying to game plan around what he knew what was coming. But it was just for most people it didn't matter if you planned or not. He was gonna knock you out. Um, so yeah, so that I think is what made him really impressive, is because at his peak he seemed like he was inevitable. Um,
I
except for
also want to also bring up that during that open weight Grand Prix, we were going to have Wanderlei Silva, Shane Carwin, but then also Jiri Prochaska got injured before the second round. So those matches could have potentially happened in another timeline. Either Shane Carwin, another rematch against Silva, or imagine Cro Cop versus Prochaska.
I'm glad. You know what? I like Jerry, but and I never want to say, oh, I'm glad someone get injured, but I'm glad that they didn't fight, because that way Crow Cup gets a nice little end to his career and doesn't get knocked out by Jiri, who is in his
Well,
prime at this point and incredibly explosive.
Jiri wanted that fight so bad, and even when he was in
Yeah.
Rizin, he would always say, "I want to fight Cro Cop. I want to fight Cro Cop," and I thought they were going to do that, but they never did.
Yeah, because they were nice. They didn't
Um,
want to feed Crow Cup to what do you call it? One of the best light heavyweights on the planet who's gonna take him to what do you call it? Take him to pieces. But yeah, Yuji Prakashka really very much the what do you call it? A throwback in that he's this terrifying European finisher coming
hmm.
over to Rise and becoming really famous. But now he's in the UFC, so now Prohashka's got to defy that potential bad luck that a lot of
Yes.
people who made their name in Japan and coming over the UFC have faced.
How funny!
He's gotta
No,
actually win the belt.
The most successful fighter from Japan will be a non-Japanese guy, but that would be the most. That would be the most ironic type of luck to happen to like a
But I mean,
Japanese.
but I mean, it even happened to in heartbreakingly, it even happened to Horiguchi when he went over to Bellator this time.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh
I
man.
suppose he had at least like won it the first time, so
Yes.
it wasn't quite what do you call it, as bad. But going over to Bellator and losing after doing so well against Sergio Pettis, looking like one of the best fighters I've ever seen, and then getting knocked out by uh, the Chicago Pimp Hand.
So Chris, I want
and
to.
kind of funny, and I think we can probably close it out on this. But I think this is gonna be a two-part question, by the way. But do you think that if Mirko Cro would have started off? I mean, do you think that if Mirko Cro would have been like here now, if he were a little bit younger and were fighting nowadays, would he be as dominant as he was back in the early 2000s? And when it comes down to Jiri Prohaska now, do you think that he is the main guy to pick up where Mirko Cro left off?
Um, to answer your first part first, Chris, I'm gonna
Okay.
say, because first of all, we've got to assume. I'm going to assume that Crow Cup goes up to heavyweight because even though he is quite small, he was still small for a heavyweight back then. He really wanted to be heavyweight or medium sized at most. Um, but I'm going to say he's at least in top five now. Heavyweight has gotten worse, if anything. There's relatively few people I would pick against him. Maybe Ngannou, maybe Blades. I think he kicks Cyril Gane's head into the moon because Cyril Gane keeps his hands at his hips at all times, and he's fast. But Crow Cup was fast back in his prime, so I think he just gets head kicked. Um, but yeah, so I think at the he maybe he's not champion just because maybe he meets too many people who can lay on him with significantly bigger bodies. But I think he does well for himself. And like I said earlier, I think he would have adapted to the cage had he been in it in his prime. It was just that he had to adapt when he was already coming out of his athletic prime. Um, and moving on to the second question, while I think Yuji is very dangerous, I don't consider him the successor of Crow Cup. I consider him the successor to Wanderlei Silva, almost, because maybe not, because Yuji's sort of the guy who's super creative and coming up with a different KO each time. Maybe it's a punch, maybe it's a spinning elbow, maybe it's something other fancy. Whereas I consider Crow Cup the guy who always came in with the same way to finish people. He was going to finish them by body kick, left straight, or head kick. And so he had his system, whereas Yuji defies system.
Chris, if you can quickly also just assess the final part of Crow Cop's career and where he stands for you. Where like is he on an MMA Mount Rushmore, or is he top 10 for you, top 5? Just give us your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah. After that particular run that he had to close out his career, where he not only became a K1 Grand Prix champion, but obviously became the Rizin Openweight Grand Prix champion and kind of go full circle with his Pride run. I mean, the dude, let's just say it, he's top 5, one of the greatest fighters of all time. Would y'all agree with me on that one?
Heavyweight or just overall?
I mean,
Or kick?
just I
Sorry, go
mean,
ahead.
just from I mean, you can say overall, you can say kickboxing to heavyweight MMA, but most definitely he would qualify as one of the top 5 fighters of all time as far as a guy who just came up from kickboxing to MMA and made both of those work successfully, especially during the time period where he was basically fighting both sports at the same time.
Oh,
But I mean, you can also say that he's one of the top 5 outside the UFC of all time, especially with Fedor being number 1. But still, though, he's definitely, in my honest opinion, one of the top 5 mixed martial artists of all time, bar none.
Josh, I'll put that to you first. I know you don't have that much time left, but yeah, succinctly tell us what you think about that. Is he? Uh,
I wouldn't put him on a Mount Rushmore. He's definitely in the top 10 greatest heavyweights of all time MMA. If you whittle that down to just best, he might be able to crack top 5, like in terms of head-to-head matches. Just because how dangerous it was as a finisher, how difficult it was to take down. I think the problem is his win. Apart from his Barnett, I don't think he ever put together the wins at heavyweight to justify getting into the top 5 when you have guys like Fedor, Stipe, Verdum, Overeem. Um, I think he'd get squeezed out of that, but definitely top 10 and top 5 in terms of ability. In terms of moving from one sport to another, I can think of very, very few people who ever did it as well as him. Like the guys you are thinking are guys like Samart, who was like the best, one of the best ever in his sports, and moved over and became like a boxing champion, or what do you call it? Or maybe Cejudo, who was Olympic champion and then became double champion MMA. I can't think of many people who were able to reach such highs in the same sports. And the only reason I'm knocking him down is that he was a very much a silver medalist in his sports rather than being the like champion in both. He's definitely set the in terms of a trailblazer, he's definitely a pioneer of how to adapt kickboxing to MMA, because no one had done it anywhere near as well as him, and almost no one ever has done it since as well as him, except for Adesanya. Um, just the level of and how quickly he achieved it, the level of takedown defense, the incredible sprawl, the incredible resistance to clinch takedowns, just incredibly impressive. Like he really, really had to work to get him down. And all that time you'd have to be dealing with the threats he was posing. So, like I say, not someone I'd put in lists of greatest of all time unless you're going top 10 heavyweight, greatest in MMA. But just his greatness transcends just looking at stuff like resume. It's more about what he was able to, how good he was at it, and what sort of standards he set for being a kickboxer who's also going to be an MMA fighter.
Here's what I'll say, and this is the last comment before we wrap it up. I would maybe say top 10 to top 15 heavyweight, but in terms of a favorite fighter, someone who I always look forward to, definitely top 5, maybe even top 3. I can definitely say I was never like another Cro Cop fight. Even you know, there was never a time where where I was never not looking forward to a fight of his. And I could definitely say that I was always a fan of his up until the very end. There's no point where I was ever down on him as a fan, never down on him as a competitor. There was something always to gleam or to that I could always enjoy from, even as his lowlights from his UFC career. There was always still something. I always still look forward to the next one, no matter how shit his maybe the previous fight was. I don't know if anybody sees it that way or agrees with that. If that I always look forward to a Cro Cop fights.
I agree. I mean, and maybe even more impressive because a lot of his fights weren't super high paced. Like sometimes they'd have like real lulls, but I think the fact that there is that sort of Jaws like menace, because you know that it's not slow because he hasn't got ideas. It's slow because he's working towards something.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I know Josh, you got to go, but before you go, just want to say thank you making your debut on our show, and I also want to give you an opportunity to plug whatever you're doing for MMASucka. I know you do a lot of stuff for us, and plug all your social media and all that good stuff.
I'm not working on anything for MMASucka right now. You can find me at Codex MMA on Twitter. But yeah, I'm hoping to get an article on Oliveira out at some point, but that's probably going to be maybe in like a month or two. But yeah, catch me on Codex MMA. We'll just have some chats on Twitter.
I'm surprised because you used to do a lot of stuff. I remember you were like accepting almost everything at one point.
Yeah. My work the thing is I've got a full-time job now, so my workload in purely MMA articles has slowed down a bit.
Oh, but, I totally get it, man. I totally get it.
And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and Chris, take us out, my friend.
Well, and by the way, Josh, how can people follow you on social media if you have any social media?
It's my only social media is Twitter at Codex MMA, but you can follow me there. So yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Other than that, the fans can follow Andrew on Twitter at abenja1. They can follow me on Twitter at chrisgary92 or on Instagram at christiangary1992. You can also follow us definitely on social media. Our Twitter handle is at WeAreRizinPod. That's WeAreRizinPod, all in one word. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel to get more great content like this, and smack that bell notification icon to get notified on when we're doing cool things like this again. And also be sure, if we ever do get back to audio form for these podcasts, to check us out on Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast provider for the We Are Rising podcast. But other than that, we thank Codex MMA for his contribution, and we hope that y'all enjoyed this little retrospective we had of one of the greatest to ever lace up a pair of gloves in either kickboxing or MMA in Mirko Cro Filipovic. We're glad y'all are part of the Rising Fan Nation, and we're even thankful that y'all joined us on the We Are Rising podcast. Till then, we hope y'all have a joyous day. And as Lenny Hart always likes to say,